I don't think, and this is a question that I have for you a bit later on, but I'm going to ask you now.
Sure.
Do you think there's going to ever be a time where everything is going to be just?
Mm. I hope so, but I don't expect it.
What would need to change
Oh
for
my
that to
God,
happen?
everything would need to change. I mean, just in the context of the US or globally. I mean, so many things. I mean, I think we have all of these systems that exist that that function in service to the things that make the world unjust. So we have a system of capitalism. Not that every country has the same relationship to capitalism as the United States does, but the United States is an aggressively capitalist country, and as a result of that, there's incredible wealth and innovation and scientific discovery, and there's also enormous and unconscionable poverty and lack of housing and education and food and all of those medical care, healthcare. Um, and the system incentivizes that. The insurance system incentivizes that. The sort of hospital industrial complex incentivizes that with respect to healthcare and other things and housing and so forth. So we have systems like capitalism. We have systems like white supremacy, right, which disadvantages people of color for the sake of propping up and elevating white people. You see that function in all sorts of places, including very powerfully and violently in the United States, but white supremacy is a global phenomenon, a global system of privileging white people and white power over the power of the majority of the globe, who are not white people. You have systems of misogyny and sexism, which of course elevate men over women and keep women in their place and deny them certain kinds of rights. And we see that happening in various ways across the country. The United States has still not been able to elect a female president. Right? There are countries that the United States colonized that have had female presidents that the United States has not had. And so all of these systems, LGBT stuff, systems of homophobia and transphobia, et cetera, all of those systems are firmly in place, and they shape the way that our social relationships and our worldviews and our experiences during our lives. And so all of those systems have to be not only challenged, but upended, frankly, in order for us to live in a world where I would call just, right? A world where we have an equitable and fair distribution of wealth and economic power, material good, etc. We would have to undo all those systems of discrimination to live in a just world where gay people and trans people and women and people of color and so forth were not treated less than, or we're not discriminated against routinely because of those social identities and because of where they're positioned in the sort of food chain or the hierarchy or what have you. So all of that stuff would have to change for a world to be just. And so, but the point of the question, I think, is that it's not just to dream, but to do, right? I dream of a world that is just, that is that kind of a world that I forgot to talk about peace as opposed to war and military. I mean, the military industrial complexes and the war machine is a whole nother thing. I've spent a lot of time doing peace activism in my life and anti-war mobilizing. And so, a just world would be a world of peace, fairness, equitable distribution of wealth, the reciprocal kind, loving treatment of all people, etc. Rights afforded and awarded and protected for everyone. But so I dream of that world, and I know that I'm never going to see it. What I want to do is do whatever I can in my lifetime, which is now, I'm closer to the grave than the womb, to make the world more just than it was when I came into the world. And so anybody who is an activist or an advocate or a human rights defender is someone, I think, by definition, that dreams big, is real about the fact that we may not ever see that, and then works every day to try to get us closer to it. And so that's kind of where I am on that. I'm not a sort of gauzy optimist. I don't have false or hokey hope. But I do wake up every day trying to figure out what I can do in my life to make the world more like the world that I dream about.
Absolutely. That was a very good point you just made. Make the world a bit more just than when you were born.
Mm-hmm.
Are we on the path? Are we already more just?
In some ways, yes. I mean, there are more rights afforded to more people now than there have been at other points in history, for sure. the concept of human rights is a global concept, right? It may have originated and developed in certain parts of the world, and the United States had a role to play in that. Even though the United States, at the moment that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was written, drafted, and put into practice, and the UN was created in 1948, we were engaged in all sorts of human rights violations in the United States. I mean, for the love of God, we had just bombed with an atomic bomb. We just bombed Japan twice to quote unquote end the war. But we literally just used a weapon of mass destruction twice to kill, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. And we're like writing this thing about human rights. It's like, well, tell that to the dead Japanese people. So, we're a country full of contradictions. And the reason I bring that up is because we sent black troops off to fight to win the war for freedom, and then segregated them on trains back home when they got home, which was one of the inspirations for the Black Civil Rights Movement after World War II. So there's all sorts of stuff that happens. Both of these things are happening at once. There's both impulses and practices of justice and impulses and practices of injustice, and they're always simultaneous and coexistent. And so at any given time, there can be progress when the forces of justice are winning, right? When social movements are powerful enough, and when politics and policy and laws change enough, there can be forward movement towards a more just society and a more just world with more rights, etc., all the things I mentioned. But there are also times in our lives where we see the countervailing forces are more powerful than the justice forces, and so we see a retreat, or a backsliding, or a backlash in some ways. And the United States right now, if I may, is experiencing one of those backlash moments where we have advances in rights. Like, I, in my lifetime, have been able to, with as a same-sex person, a person in a same-sex marriage, as a queer gay person, right? I can get married to my husband. I couldn't do that before 2015 nationally and 2004 in Massachusetts. So for most of my lifetime, it was illegal for me and my husband, who are currently married for 14 years, to be married. That's just one example. We have more rights, but there is an incredible backlash. There have been 3 anti-gay hate crimes that have occurred in our town in Massachusetts in the last 3 weeks. Wow. So there's the first time in recent memory where there's been a hate crime in the town we live in. Is called Provincetown, and it's a very LGBTQ friendly place. One of the reasons we moved there. And there are usually not anti-LGBTQ hate crimes going on there. What the current political regime, the Trump administration, and the MAGA movement have done is they've given permission and license for people to sort of come out in a different way and be violent against LGBTQ people. And we're seeing more of that happening. We're seeing that against Jewish people. We're seeing that against Muslim people, against Palestinians, against Black and brown people, against immigrants and migrants of different nationalities. So we're seeing an increase in violence, which is part of the backlash against the sort of diversity of the world, the global diversity that's only grown over time, and also the expansion of rights. One of the things that I call this the paradox of progress in my work. And what I mean by that is every time there are moments of progress where rights advance, where we get closer to justice, there's always going to be opposition to that, right? That's why social movements are necessary, and we don't just do this through law and politics, because people in power don't wake up one day and say, you know what, let's give rights and privileges to all the people who don't have rights and privileges. Like, Lincoln didn't wake up and say, you know what, I'm going to free the slaves, right? There had to be an abolitionist movement to push that, right? And so as rights and justice and these kinds of things advance, there are always forces of opposition that at any given time are going to be transcendent and emergent. And right now what you have in the United States is a huge elevation of the forces, in my opinion, of injustice, of white supremacy, right, of anti-LGBTQ prejudice, of misogyny and prejudice and against women, growing gap between rich and poor. There's all sorts of stuff that constitutes a backlash to the advance of rights, justice, etc. And we're seeing that. And you see that globally, right? There's been a lot of democratic backsliding. There's been increased violations of human rights. There have been, democracies that have turned into authoritarian regimes. The United States is on that path right now, really for the first major time in our history. We've had more repressive moments in our history over the 250 years or so the United States has been in existence. But right now we're experiencing the closest we have ever come to the triumph of an authoritarian regime in the context of a country that is the world's most robust multiracial democracy. And that, for what it's worth, this is probably another conversation for my therapist, causing us an enormous amount of anxiety and other things right now. It's a very, very concerning turn.
Absolutely.
But the last thing I'll say, I'll end on a little high note. The backlash is evidence that the progress exists. So backlashes need to lash back against something. And backlashes, when they're this fierce, are lashing back against the wins of the social movements and of the society more broadly, right? The reason why the backlash is against certain kinds of groups is because every single one of the groups I mentioned, women, LGBTQ people, Black and brown people, immigrants, etc., every single one of those groups in the United States has gained rights over the course of the 20th and 21st centuries. And the backlash is against them because they don't want them to have those rights. And that's where we are.